Someone drilled holes in my houseboat, it started sinking, and the HOA president called the cops on me for polluting her view. If that sounds backwards, congratulations, you're not living in a suburb run by a woman who thinks bylaws outrank the US Constitution. This story ends with a houseboat rising and a Karen sinking, but trust me, the way it gets there is absolutely unhinged. She wanted me gone from my lake, but she didn't know I had the deed, the footage, and a lawyer who owes me a favor. If that sounds insane, buckle up because it only gets weirder from here. Ever seen a control freak wage war over a lake? You are about to. My name's Bo Henderson. I came back to my granddad's old ranch with the dream of peace, woodwork, and a houseboat that floated like freedom. The lake was ours, literally, fed by a spring wrapped in wild willows and untouched by bureaucracy. Or so I thought, until one fine Tuesday, I heard high heels stomping gravel like they were mad at the earth. In came Doris Flanderson, an HOA president so dedicated to visual order, she once fined someone for having patriotic wind chimes. She pointed at my half-finished houseboat like it had run over her golden retriever and yelled, "Eyes, this floating structure registered with the Community Aesthetic Board." I stared at her the way you stare at a person who asks if your barn has Wi-Fi. "Ma'am, this lake's private. Been in my family since before your clipboard learned to walk." But Doris wasn't after logic. She was after dominance. She introduced herself like she was running for supreme leader of grass height enforcement. "This is a clear violation of residential harmony," she said, flipping her sunglasses down like a budget FBI agent. I tried to be polite. "Really, I did. I offered coffee." She countered with threats of formal litigation. "I explained the lake was on my deed," she said. "That doesn't matter. It affects the vibe. Now, I've met all kinds of people. Folks who collect vintage tractors, folks who think salt is spicy. But never in my life had I met someone who believed vibe law beat property law. She wasn't even mad about noise, pollution, or party crowds. No, her issue was that my houseboat looked like driftwood with opinions. And if that insult wasn't embroidered on her throw pillows, I'll eat my tape measure. She gave me 48 hours to remove it. "Or else you'll face consequences from the proper authorities," she snapped, snapping a picture with her phone like it was evidence from a true crime show called Murder on Lake Ugly. As she walked back up the path, heels stabbing the dirt like she was trying to aerate it with rage, I just stood there thinking, what in the hollow gourd of suburbia just happened? My houseboat floated. My property was mine. And yet a stranger in a pantsuit just tried to declare war using nothing but passive aggression and bold fonts. I knew then peace was no longer on the menu, and neither was logic. She gave me 48 hours to remove my boat. But by hour 12, I was already planning how to remove her influence instead, ready for her next move. It involves binoculars, binders, and one very public meltdown. If paranoia had a skincare routine and a Costco membership, it'd look exactly like Doris watching me with binoculars from a folding chair 300 feet away. She sat out there daily like she was paid by the hour. Only instead of monitoring wildlife, she was logging every move I made in a spiral notebook labeled Community Threats. I saw her jot down things like 6542 p.m., suspicious wood staining, and once she even wrote 7710 a.m. birdbath activity suspicious. Ma'am, that was a robin. But to Doris, every ripple on the lake was a personal attack on suburban values. The sabotage started slow like a bad cough before the full-blown plague. First, a dock rope mysteriously snapped overnight. Then my wrench set went missing, only to reappear in a Ziploc bag on my front step, cleaned, labeled, and ominously arranged in alphabetical order. The woman was terrorizing me with organization. I once caught a glimpse of her binder, and I kid you not, it had color-coded tabs for offenses, visual crimes, and, boo, just my name, its own tab. That's not just obsessive, that's spiritual warfare via Microsoft Office. And the rumors. Doris worked the neighborhood grapevine like a Vegas card dealer. One day, my neighbor Sheila asked if I was legally allowed to build submarines. Submarines. I told her no, I'm building a houseboat, not starting a lake invasion. But Doris had already told half the development that I was installing unauthorized under-hull storage structures, which is HOA speak for Bo's doing something I don't understand, and therefore it's illegal. She hosted a lakefront awareness session where she told residents I was contaminating aquatic serenity and attracting invasive carp with my choice of wood stain. I didn't even know fish could be pretentious. The real kicker came when Frank Davis, my neighbor across the ridge, drove down in his dusty red pickup and got out looking like he'd just found termites in his retirement fund. "Boo," he said, "you didn't hear it from me, but Doris has been filing environmental complaints. State-level stuff. She's talking to agencies like you're rerouting the Mississippi." I stared at Frank for a beat, then asked, "Did she also mention I trained the frogs to hold town meetings?" He chuckled, but his eyes weren't joking. "She's serious, Bo. She thinks you're the Unabomber of boat design." I realized then that Doris wasn't just making noise. She was building a legal crescendo. She wasn't documenting for fun. She was curating a case file, color-coded and cross-tabbed, that made me look like a water-based supervillain. That night I went to bed hearing phantom camera clicks in my dreams and woke up convinced she was out there charting my REM cycles. It wasn't just about my boat anymore. This woman was planning a takedown like it was prom night, and I stole her crown. And if I learned anything from this mess, it's that a lie repeated often enough doesn't just sound like truth. It starts getting mailed out as a community newsletter. What does a control freak do when her binder isn't enough? Next, Doris brings out her secret weapon, weaponized pity. Stick around, because her fake tears are about to make waves. They say never show weakness to a predator. I say never show progress to a Karen. Both will end in blood or bureaucracy. And in my case, it ended with Doris pacing her deck in socked heels, mistaking my act of strategic silence for submission. If Sun Tzu had written The Art of HOA War, he would have started with feign retreat, confused the clipboard. So I staged a performance. Took down 2 railings, left a stack of 2xe4s on the shore like I'd run out of steam and ambition. Even threw a dusty tarp over the hull for good measure. Doris was back on her ridge within minutes, squinting through binoculars like she'd just spotted a tiger retreating. I waved. She didn't wave back. Instead, she sprinted to her patio like the HOA Olympics had a documentation category and she was defending gold. Within 24 hours, I started hearing whispers, not metaphorical ones, literal whispers. I heard he's packing up. I think the HOA scared him off. And my personal favorite from one lorn, watering spectator, that houseboat was a front for something. No one sands that much wood unless they're hiding a lab. Turns out, fake surrender in a nosy neighborhood is like throwing raw meat into a tank full of rumor piranhas. Doris didn't back off. She upgraded. Suddenly I was the star of the HOA's new emergency safety bulletin. That's a laminated page slipped under every door, complete with dramatic bullet points like structural hazard, unauthorized flotation, and sawdust infiltration. She actually called me a mobile pollutant. I haven't laughed that hard since a turkey flew through my uncle's windshield in 2002. Doris even added a hotline number for anonymous lake-related concerns. Spoiler, it forwarded to her landline. I called it just to hear her say, "Flanderson speaking. How may I process your panic?" Then came the evening I realized I'd underestimated just how many people were now watching me like I was auditioning for Breaking Buoy. Lake Meth Chronicles. A neighbor I barely knew stopped by and casually asked if I was still open for business. I said, "Excuse me," and he said, "Well, you know, building that thing." When I told him it was a handmade houseboat, He gave me the same look you'd give someone who says they knit their own Wi-Fi. Doris had twisted the narrative so thoroughly, people now thought I was constructing an unsanctioned water fortress. One resident even asked if my solar panels could attract lightning. But here's what Doris didn't realize. While she was flooding the neighborhood with fear, I was collecting receipts. Every bulletin, every voicemail, every creepy little drive, by with her phone tilted sideways like she was filming a wildlife documentary called The Last Rancher. I wasn't backing down. I was baiting her forward. Playing weak wasn't surrender. It was strategy. She thought I was caving. But I was just baiting the queen crab into her own trap. Manipulators mistake silence for surrender. That's when it's time to whisper and strike later. What happens when a control freak thinks she's won? Next, Doris goes government, bringing backup badges and her own twisted definition of environmental justice. You'll want to see who shows up at my gate. Some men inherit watches. I inherited water rights, a cedar chest, and a vendetta with a woman who believes geese need swimming permits. While Doris was out drafting HOA newsletters like war manifestos, I was in my attic, elbowed deep in dust, chasing a ghost in overalls, my grandfather. He was the kind of man who didn't say much unless it came with a warning or a moral. And stuffed inside a cedar chest beneath mothball-scented maps and hand-drawn land surveys, I found both. What I uncovered wasn't just paper. It was artillery. Land grants older than sliced bread, stamped with more authority than Doris's imaginary job title. Turns out, my family didn't just own the cabin or the dock. We owned the entire lake, and a 200-yard cushion of dry land around it. If Doris's ACA map had lines, my deed had borders that laughed in her face. Nestled between old plats and tax rolls was a brittle journal page in Grandpa's jagged scrawl. They'll come for what they didn't build. Stand tall. Use ink, not fists. I read that line twice. Then once more. That was my green light. I called Ms. Redmond, the estate lawyer who handled my grandpa's affairs. I expected a 5-minute formality. Instead, she asked me to hold while she pulled a decade's worth of property files from the archives like a legal librarian on caffeine. When she returned to the line, her voice was half astonishment, half victory march. "Mr. Henderson," she said, "you own the lake, the bed beneath it, and the banks it touches. Your family filed every document before the county even had zoning laws." I nearly dropped the phone. Doris wasn't harassing me on community land. She was trespassing on my private pond like a swan in denial. While I waited for certified copies, I went full forensic rancher, organizing documents, scanning maps, even calling Frank to confirm a few plot lines. "Boo," he said, "if what you're saying is true, that woman's been peacocking around on property that ain't hers." I told him, "Frank, she's been circling the lake like she's Moses with a megaphone." He replied, "Then it's time to part the HOA, brother." I laughed, but under it was a boil of satisfaction. This wasn't just revenge. It was restitution with footnotes. I sat that night on the edge of my houseboat, holding the deed in one hand and Grandpa's journal in the other. I imagined him watching from the porch of heaven with a mug of black coffee and a smirk. I'd played polite long enough. I'd let her monologue like a Disney villain with a clipboard. But now I held the narrative and the notarized paperwork. And just like that, Karen was trespassing on my water with the legal elegance of a raccoon in church. When the facts are on your side, you don't yell, you wait for them to trip on their own mouth. So how does a clipboard tyrant react when she learns her lake tantrum happened on someone else's land? Next up, Doris brings backup, and they all wear government badges. Buckle up, because the parade is about to roll in. You ever watch a woman wave down a fish and wildlife truck like it's a cab? Welcome to Tuesday. Doris showed up in my driveway like she was directing traffic at a crisis center. Her white sedan led the convoy like a war chariot, one EPA inspector, one county planning officer, one man from Lake Integrity. not a real thing. And, I kid you not, a pest control guy gripping his clipboard like it was holy scripture. I leaned against my fence post sipping black coffee, watching this caravan of confused authority figures like they were trick or treaters lost in the wrong subdivision. "Good morning, gentlemen," I said, in my best customer service voice. "Y'all here to measure the humidity of my soul, or just the pH of the lake?" The EPA inspector chuckled. Doris did not. She launched into a speech that sounded like a Yelp review for a toxic spill. "This man is operating an illegal water facility that endangers local wildlife and violates every known community standard." I raised an eyebrow. Even the unwritten ones that didn't go over well. She handed out color-coded folders like party favors, and the group began their inspection. Clipboards ready, boots clicking, eyes skeptical. Now, here's where it got good. They combed the shoreline. They sniffed the water like it owed them rent. One guy even measured a cattail. The planning officer got on one knee like he was proposing to the foundation of my dock. Doris shadowed them like a paranoid pageant mom, whispering helpful lies. "He uses treated wood. His solar panels are aerial hazards. I've seen frogs behaving oddly. But every time they checked something, they came back with the same conclusion: legal, clean, compliant, peaceful. Like a monk in overalls." And then she snapped. Somewhere between the cattail analysis and the pest guy declaring, "No evidence of invasive species," Doris lost the plot completely. She stomped forward, red-faced and veins vibrating, and screamed, "You're all blind! He's corrupting the ecosystem with his aura!" I nearly dropped my thermos. The EPA inspector, bless his clipboard, calmly said, "Ma'am, we don't regulate vibes." The pest guy nodded solemnly like that was a departmental motto, and the county planner started writing notes with the intensity of someone who now regretted his entire career path. The inspection wrapped up with a summary so clean you could laminate it and hang it in a kindergarten. No violations, no pollutants, no unauthorized construction, no action needed. And as they packed up to leave, I heard one of them mutter, "Frankly, if there's a threat to the community, it ain't the boat." Doris tried to pivot the moment with a dramatic sigh and whispered, "You'll regret this. Justice always returns." I wanted to reply, "So does allergy season," but I held back. By the end, the inspectors wanted her fenced in, not the lake. When your ego writes checks your HOA title can't cash, expect overdrafts, especially in public. So what does Doris do after her government backup fails? She stops playing victim and starts playing demolition crew. You won't believe what she does to the houseboat next. Only Doris could vandalize my boat and then report herself as the witness. That's not just audacity. That's diet sociopathy with a twist of lime. I woke up to the sweet sound of cordless power tools echoing across the lake, followed by muffled instructions like, lower, there, right in the hull." At first, I thought I was dreaming of a Home Depot nightmare. But when I looked out my window, reality slapped me harder than a tax audit. Two guys in cargo shorts were crouched beside my houseboat with drills, and there stood Doris, arms folded, supervising like she was hosting Extreme Makeover, Federal Crime Edition. I sprinted down, half dressed and full of adrenaline, shouting, "Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing?" One of the goons froze like I'd yelled, "Immigration." The other bolted with the kind of guilt that screams, "Paid in cash." Doris, ever the actor, turned toward me with a grin you'd expect from a cartoon villain right before the dam explodes. "We're conducting a safety test, Mr. Henderson. You can thank me later." And that's when I heard it, the subtle glug-glug of heartbreak. My houseboat, handcrafted over months with love, sweat, and probably illegal levels of coffee, was taking on water like it had a grudge. Within minutes, the cabin was half submerged. I dove in to grab what I could. My grandpa's journal, the legal documents, and one plastic tub labeled, "Don't drown, please." Doris stood on the dock dialing 9911 with the emotional range of a DMV printer. "Yes, I'd like to report an environmental hazard," she cooed. "This man has intentionally sunk his boat to fake an insurance claim." I stood waist deep in her crime scene, holding soggy proof of innocence while she performed victimhood like it was off Broadway and overdue. If gaslighting were an Olympic sport, she'd already be banned for doping. 20 minutes later, Officer Rudy Nash arrived in his cruiser with the same look cops get when they're 2 minutes from clocking out and someone starts yelling, "Federal." Rudy grew up around here. He knew my grandpa, once helped fix our windmill, and had the calm demeanor of a man who'd been through 3 divorces, a beekeeping phase. Doris pounced first. "Officer, this man has committed insurance fraud, environmental sabotage, and public endangerment." She practically curtsied at the end. Rudy nodded slowly and turned to me. "Boo," he said. "You got anything that says otherwise?" "Oh, did I?" From my waterproof tub, I pulled out the documents, deed surveys, notarized everything, and handed them over like a magician pulling doves from a wet hat. Rudy flipped through them, eyebrows climbing with every page. "Well," he muttered, "looks like this lake's yours, and the boat too. Unless the fish start pressing charges, I think we've got a different situation." Doris's jaw dropped so hard, you could have registered it on the Richter scale. I've never seen a woman pivot so fast from righteous fury to, "I'm just trying to help." Sometimes the best proof is letting someone describe their own crime on video, especially when they film it in 1080p like an idiot. She may have sunk my boat, but I was about to sink her HOA Ray like a brick in a blender. What happens when a Karen's lies go viral in her own voice? Up next, the community meeting where Doris premieres the footage. Unaware, it's her own confession on the big screen. Nothing says, "I'm innocent," like showing the HOA a video that accidentally proves you orchestrated felony vandalism. Doris called a special community meeting like she was unveiling the next iPhone. Flyers were slipped under doors. Emails were sent with subject lines like, "Urgent truth exposure." She even brought snacks, cheese cubes and store-brand soda, as if that would soften the fact that she was about to light herself on fire in high definition. I showed up 10 minutes early, sat in the back, and waited like I'd brought the popcorn, because it was showtime. She strutted to the front of the clubhouse in her signature blazer that screamed I Googled power and tapped her laptop like it owed her rent. "Thank you all for coming. Tonight we will view definitive proof that Mr. Henderson is a threat to this community." She clicked play with the flair of a villain, revealing their evil plan, which, incidentally, she was. On-screen grainy footage of my houseboat, 2 hired goons with drills, and Doris pacing like a foreman with anger management issues. Her voice rang out clear as day. "Drill faster before he gets here!" The room went still. Even the fridge holding the soda seemed to go silent. One HOA member audibly choked on a baby carrot. My neighbor Frank slowly turned his head like he'd just realized the karaoke mic was live. Doris, somehow oblivious, tried to narrate over the evidence. "As you can see, he appears to be sabotaging his own property." A beat later, the video showed me sprinting toward the dock, screaming, "What are you doing?" while her goons scrambled like raccoons caught in a flashlight. The final nail. Doris's voice, off camera, "Hurry up. We don't have much time." Frank stood up like a preacher spotting sin at the bake sale. "Ma'am," he said, voice level, "you just showed us a felony in surround sound." Another neighbor muttered, "That's not sabotage, that's sabotage management." Officer Rudy Nash, seated quietly in the corner like a chaperone at a teen concert, cleared his throat. "What we just saw," he said, "is direct evidence of destruction of property, trespassing, and false reporting. That video's going straight into evidence." Doris blinked. She still didn't get it. It was like watching someone explain gravity to a cat. She tried to regain control with a final gasp of nonsense. This was taken out of context. You don't understand what he's capable of. But the room had turned. You could feel the tide roll back. No more pity, no more doubt, just popcorn munching disbelief. Frank raised his hand. I moved to remove Doris Flanderson as HOA president effective immediately. The motion was seconded before he finished his sentence and passed with a voice vote so loud it rattled the water fountain. Doris brought popcorn to a courtroom and ended up choking on her own credits. Justice is best served at 720p with optional closed captions, and ideally your own voice admitting guilt. So how do you bury a scandal that just got public? In next part, Doris tries to rewrite the ending, but Karma's already edited the script. Stick around for the twist that made her house disappear. Doris sold her house in shame, but rumor has it even Zillow labeled it a bad vibes. One neighbor claimed the open house tour ended with a psychic whispering. This place has Karen energy. She vanished faster than free wine at a town hall. Her once pristine mailbox now leaned like it was embarrassed, and the HOA's group thread, formerly a hotbed of Doris-fueled fury, was now just gardening tips and passive-aggressive memes. Me, I was back on the lake, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a court victory in the other. The civil case wrapped faster than a budget Christmas present. The judge barely needed to deliberate after watching the infamous sabotage video, which had since been lovingly referred to in town as the drill heard round the dock. Doris was fined, ordered to pay restitution, and banned from holding any HOA position within 500 feet of a lake or a logic puzzle. The HOA board issued a formal apology and even voted to create a new rule. No president may bring power tools to another person's property uninvited. I framed that one next to the lake deed. Rebuilding the boat wasn't just restoration, it was redemption with teak wood trim. This time, I added reinforced pontoons, smart sensors, and a horn that played, and no stopping ooze now. It floated better, felt stronger, and somehow made coffee taste bolder. Then one afternoon, as the sun warmed the deck like a gentle reminder that life goes on, a knock came from the dock. It was Janine, the new HOA president. She didn't carry a clipboard or a threat, just a smile and a peace offering, a brass plaque that read, "Float on." Boo! I thought that was the end of the story, until a reporter from Houseboats and Havoc Monthly called, asking if he could feature the lake incident. Apparently, someone from town had sent in the video, and the editorial staff voted unanimously to run it under the headline, "The HOA that sank itself." It exploded faster than Doris's temper at a non-compliant garden gnome. Within days, her voice, "Drill faster before he gets here," was a TikTok soundbite remixed with dubstep and dancing beavers. One version hit 3 million views. I got tagged in hundreds of comments, mostly saying, "This Bo guy is unbothered energy." And honestly, I was, not because I won, but because I didn't lose myself in the fight. Doris tried to drown me in paperwork, paranoia, and property damage. But I stayed standing, well, floating. Grandpa's journal sat in a sealed case inside the new cabin, with a sticky note on the front that read, "Use ink, not fists. But keep the fists ready just in case." See, this wasn't just about a boat. It was about what happens when someone tries to steal your calm, your name, your home, and how you take it back without becoming the villain in return. You can fight fire with water, or in this case, a legally owned shoreline. And one very ironic viral clip. When someone tries to sink you with lies, stay afloat with legacy, laughter, and law. In the end, the boat rose. The HOA fell, and Doris, well, she became the cautionary tale told over s'mores by the lake she thought she owned. So if you've ever felt gaslit, outnumbered, or straight up bulldozed by someone swinging fake authority like a rusty sword, remember this story, because justice doesn't always wear a badge or a gavel. Sometimes it's just a guy in muddy boots holding a coffee cup saying, "Nah." If this story gave you a laugh, a little hope, or a push to stand your ground, don't keep it to yourself. Drop a comment with your wildest HOA moment or how you handled a real-life Karen. Smash that like button if you believe in legacy over lunacy, and hit subscribe, because next time we're telling the story of the man who legally renamed his cul-de-sac just to get the HOA off his back. This has been HOA Didn't Know, where clipboards come to die and dignity floats.